guys, we're back in the studio for a little scratch off cinema with my friends Joey Bones and Scott Paris. We're going to be talking about Val Kilmer. Guys, we just lost Val Kilmer, a real treasure of the film industry, of storytelling, of acting, of art. And I know you, both of you guys are familiar with his works, some more than others. And I asked you to come on today so we could do a little bit of a recollection, a little bit of a rewind, looking back at the films of Val Kilmer that we most appreciated. And I know you guys have opinions on that. I'm going to start out and say Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday in the movie Tombstone, I think is his pinnacle work. He's just such into that. He's just so into that character.
Absolutely.
And brings such an affectation to it. You know, it's this aged, at the end of his run, cowboy, battling with some health issues and some other demons. Right. And I feel like Val Kilmer just brings that role home. And to me, it makes the entire movie. You know, he's not the central character. He's kind of a sidekick in a sense, but I'm going to go ahead and say he's the Batman of Tombstone. And maybe that's a great transition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He, Doc Holliday was one of those names you'd hear kind of like Billy the Kid. Like there was such a cartoonish sound to the name that if you heard stories of the Wild West or even, what they based the Tombstone off of, I guess you don't picture them as real human beings. And yeah, he played that character. Even like with his flaws, with his problems, then with his, was it tuberculosis that took him? I mean, what was
I believe
he was spitting up blood at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just
that's what it was.
To play a sick man and you're going, I care so much about this character that before I saw the movie, I just thought was very cartoonish. Like Doc Holliday, I think of like Huckleberry Finn. I think of all these names that those don't feel like humans to me. They feel like stories in a book.
Right.
You know.
And it reminds me too of, it's one of those things where the fiction and the fact kind of get tangled up together, and sometimes you can't tell the difference. I just recently finished watching Yellowstone because I'm a huge fan of the modern Western. I rewatched the whole season through with my wife, and there's a scene in that fairly late in the run where one of the main cowboys, Rip, is talking to some kids who want to pet a horse, and they're kind of taken aback. They're kind of wild by the fact that he's you're a real cowboy, and we didn't know if cowboys were real or just fiction. We didn't think there were any cowboys, and he sort of says, well, eventually there might not be any, but I am a cowboy, and it's like that. Fiction and fact sort of, again, just kind of tangling up with each other. My daughter babysat for some kids, and she was talking to them about a movie that they were watching, one of the dinosaur movies, probably Jurassic Park or something like that. I think that they were a little incredulous that dinosaurs were a thing. If I remember correctly, I think that they lumped them in with dragons and other beasts of fantasy, So sometimes it's hard to separate fact from fiction.
Well, yeah, it becomes larger than life. It becomes folklore, and you're right. Like it's hard to imagine, oh yeah, that was a real thing, because I drew those on as a kid, like with crayons. Like you're right, it just doesn't make as much sense. And even to see the bones at a museum, just because you haven't got to see one walking around, you don't think it's real. And with the Wild West characters, I mean, those guys wanted fame, maybe. Like it seems like, at least, again, the legend and the folklore, it always seems like certain people, especially the outlaws and the vigilantes and the kind of wilder guys of the Wild West, they wanted you to know that name. They wanted that name to travel through stories. So when they showed up to town, their name preceded them, like, oh, you're the such and such. Like, I've heard of you. And they're like, and they wanted that. That was kind of how to, movie star before there was a movie star, was being such a crazy person and having this story about you that
one of my favorite characters in another Western movie, Unforgiven, with Clint Eastwood, is the writer character in that. Remember that? You remember he's a writer, he's following around a bunch of cowboys and trying to write their stories. He's one of the serial novelists, and he's dissuaded from some of his fantastical ideas about cowboys by being in the presence of them throughout the movie. And I just found that really sort of remarkable. But you're right. They were put up on this heroic sort of pedestal, and they become absolutely larger than life. And that is definitely the case for Val Kilmer in this role. He gave it something larger than life, in my opinion, in his performance. And that's why it's probably my favorite Val Kilmer movie. I got a few others that are right up there in the battle for a top Val Kilmer movie, though. But I want to hear, what do you guys think?
I agree completely. I've always been curious since Tombstone came out, because we were pretty young when Tombstone came out. I've always been curious if any historian can prove that he said, I'm your Huckleberry. Because that's was that just created for the film, or did he really talk that way?
Oh, man.
And were there enough historians to write down the things he would have said, or did they just kind of add to the lore? Because either way, it's great.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm your Huckleberry.
There it is. There it is. How great is that?
It's awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
He actually says it twice in the movie. He says it in the bar first time to Johnny Ringo, and then he says it again at the end when he steps out of the shadows in true Batman style.
No, he was a badass. I even wonder if like Huckleberry Hound, the cartoon character, was that a thing that cowboys said? Was I'm your Huckleberry? Huckleberry Hound was a cowboy cartoon dog, right? So like, where did Huckleberry come from in the Western tradition?
Yeah, I can't say I've researched the origin of the word Huckleberry. I actually worked with a guy named Huckleberry.
That's great.
Last job. To truth, I mean, everybody called him Huck, but his name was Huckleberry.
So he was your Huckleberry.
He was. I keep alluding to Kilmer's Batman because I know Scott wants to talk about Batman Forever, and I'm trying to transition to that.
Yeah.
And he's not picking up on what I'm putting down here.
No, I just wanted to give you room to I want to give you room to talk about, because Tombstone was a more iconic role, and when he passed, I think every post was, oh my God, Tombstone, and they're right for that, because it was amazing. And what I was saying kind of off air was, to me, he was my favorite Batman, because I go to Comic Cons, and I worked for Comic Cons for a while, and love comic films, love comic books. And I made not argument, but maybe the position that he, for me, was the one who got it right. Mm-hmm. And maybe because he's such a deep actor, otherwise, he was the best Bruce Wayne to me, because he was an attractive man. He was very charming, and he could play off the Bruce Wayne dinner party, rich philanthropist, billionaires, etc., mogul, kind of like a Tony Stark later with the Marvel stuff. But then he was also physically fit enough that you thought, well, yeah, I could see him kicking butt and doing this other stuff.
Right.
And how easily a guy like him could hide that, because you don't think, he physically could do it, but you don't get the idea that that's the same guy, because he was playing the billionaire side so well. And Michael Keaton, he was goofy and fun, and I love him, and he was the first as far as films. He did a good Bruce Wayne, because sometimes billionaires are kind of just dorks. So he kind of nailed that version of it. But I don't picture him kicking butt.
Right.
Even though they made him do it, I didn't believe it. And George Clooney was maybe the same way. I don't picture George Clooney kicking butt. And then when Christopher Nolan took it over and made it darker, I believe that Christian Bale, he played off the tortured kid who lost his parents, had this vendetta. He played the dark side of that really well. But when he played Bruce Wayne, I didn't believe it, because he was charming. I mean, he was a handsome guy and all these other things. But I didn't get that he played the part of society mogul.
Yeah.
He reluctantly, and Robert Pattinson's doing the same thing. He's doing this brooding, I don't really want to be here. I don't want to be at this formal dinner. But Val Kilmer, in real comic book fashion, and they are comic books, so I believe Batman Forever was goofy, but it's a comic book. It's going to be a little goofy. That's the whole idea. It's not. I feel like Nolan's were so dark and real. It was like, that's almost so believable. It's unbelievable. This should be a fun. It's a comic book. It should be pretty fun and silly. and
I've given this a lot of thought.
counterparted against Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones. Just what a great mix of good actors who can be deep and then know, oh, today is fun day. We're going to do a fun movie.
Right.
And we're going to do a comic book. And that reminds me of Adam West, because the TV show was silly, but it's supposed to be. It's a comic book. It's supposed to be a little silly.
Yep. Yeah.
So no, that's why I fought for the whole Batman perspective. Was, to some people that was a throwaway film, but I'm like, yeah, you don't get it though. He's actually really playing this part, both sides of a coin. And it's like Clark Kent. I mean, the new Superman really looks great to me for the same reason. That kid, when he slicks his hair back and puts on the glasses, I think Clark Kent. And when he has his hair loose and no glasses, I'm going, I see it. I see how people would get confused. That does not look like the same man. And I love that James Gunn is doing that, because people were in the comic book. Of course, it's a kid's story, but people were fooled just by a pair of glasses and a quick change in a phone booth. You know,
right.
And I thought Val Kilmer did that with Batman. He was a great, believable Bruce Wayne, and then as Batman, I thought, I can see it. I can see him doing this.
Yeah,
right.
No, you make a great point. Like you said, it's the closest thing we have to a comic book, I think, in the Batman, in a Batman film, and it's the closest thing certainly to the goofiness of the old TV series with Adam West. And goofiness doesn't have to be a black mark against the movie. No, it can be fun.
It'll never win an Oscar.
Right.
They don't let those movies win Oscars, which is sad, because some of them are quite deep, and the storylines are really well written. I just finished Daredevil, the TV series on Disney, and it's got the same stuff. It's got darkness. It's got real comic book stuff when it needs to, and the plot was fantastic. Some of the loopholes with the law that they were working in, I was like, this could be Law and Order. It's just they wrote it for Daredevil, and I thought that's great. They were finding all these loopholes, and I thought, this is so well written. This isn't just a comic story. Like I'm an adult 43-year-old man, and I think this is interesting.
I mean, Batman certainly is a darker superhero character than some of the others, but we forget though he's a fun character too. He has fun. He's funny in the comic books sometimes. He has a sense of humor. Bruce Wayne, especially, has that sort of like high class sort of snark to him, that kind of aloofness, and he's a little crass and sarcastic, sardonic, and you gotta get that has to come across. And it's the same way with Spider-Man and Peter Parker. That character has to be funny.
Peter Parker was a kid who landed in an interesting situation, but he's still a kid. And I thought that his name's escaping me, but the younger guy who's playing it currently, I think he's doing a great job. Tom Holland. I think he's doing a great job as a youngster who's going through that and going, oh, I have this great gift. I'd like to do the right thing, but I'm a kid. And I think he's playing it really, really smart. But in Batman Forever, and again, this is more the writers, but Val Kilmer got to play it out. I want to say, was her name Meridian Chase? Who was the psychiatrist that he kind of falls in love with? It's the Vicky Vale replacement. I want to say it's Dr. Chase.
It was Chase Meridian, I think.
Chase Meridian, okay.
I
did.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But in the phone book, it would have been Meridian Chase.
It definitely would have been.
But I mean, what a clever thing to do is have him seek out the attention of a psychiatrist, because he's a broken individual, and that's what led him to do the mask and the crime fighting, and falls in love with someone who could potentially understand him at a core level. And I thought that's really clever too. And I don't remember if she's in the comics. I just remember Vicky Vale, the reporter. But I thought that's got to happen. You know what I mean? She's interested in a Batman because she wants to diagnose him, and she doesn't even realize, because he's playing the parts so well, the two parts, the two sides of that coin. No pun to Two-Face, but how interesting that she's wrapped up in the mythology of what this man's doing, that she's dating him and doesn't even realize until close to the end. I just thought it was great. It's so comically valid. It's great.
Yeah. Have you seen this trend of of taking like the Peanuts, for example, and saying like, everyone or Winnie the Pooh, and assigning each character to some emotion or some kind of mental disorder or something like that, saying that Winnie the Pooh is just basically a story about a kid and all his various mental disorders, like Eeyore's, like depression and and that sort of thing.
I could see it. Well, they made that Inside Out movie about, it
Yeah,
was kind of the same
exactly.
thing where they not over glorified, but like over personified
Right.
emotions as individuals. It's kind of like
But you
Fight
could,
Club, but for kids.
yeah, but
Right.
you could say that about Batman too, about the Batman
Sure.
universe, is that a lot of these characters are dealing with some kind of issue in their head, some kind of mental capacity issue, or some kind of psychological issue.
Sure.
You have the Joker, and and Batman, of course, is sort of struggling with identity like all the time. And so you're right to kind of front a character that's a psychiatrist in that movie. Pretty good move.
And the other thing I think is interesting too is, again, from a writing standpoint, from the people who write those stories and write the scripts, all the way back to their origins of the comics and so forth. All those characters, I mean, comic books deal with multiple writers, but any story that has heroes and villains and things like that, that's all usually being filtered through one person's lens as a writer. And you're seeing all their demons portrayed in the story. Like, I'm a huge Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan, big Douglas Adams fan. And the best part is when you hear Douglas Adams do an interview, he's very proper. He was very British, and exactly as, well kept as a British man in the 60s would have been. But to read the story, it's like, I don't know if you're familiar with Hitchhiker's Guide, but Arthur Dent is this very normal, boring human, and Ford Prefect is this wild Doctor Who style alien that just wants to travel and have fun. And you've got Zaphod Beeblebrox, who's this egotistical crazy man, and the way he writes is fantastic. And then you stop and go, you came up with all this. These guys are all parts of you. If you really wanted to dissect it, you have stock in every one of these characters. And don't we all? Don't we all have days where you are Batman trying to do the right thing, and you are the Joker who's kind of fed up and wants to see everything burn, and you are the Riddler who's puzzled by this? Like, I could see that they're emotionally based, for sure.
Yeah. No, I think that a lot of stories these days play with that idea of duality, that good and evil and all of us. Batman, the Chris Nolan movies, I think it was The Dark Knight, when Harvey Dent says something about you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Right.
Yes.
And we all have shades of that, of all of those things inside of us. And I think there are a lot of stories today that really play on that theme.
Did you hear did you ever read the interview that Chris Nolan's brother actually came up with that line, and Chris Nolan didn't understand it?
Yeah, I saw that.
He said Harvey Dent should say this line, and he put it in the film, but he didn't even realize. He was kind of like, I don't really get it, but yeah, we'll have him say it. But it was, I think that you're right. That's really a standout part, because you fight the system so long and you get so beat down by it. You go, okay, I'll play by your rules, and how you like me now. And we all kind of do that sometimes.
Right. Chime in here, Joey. What do you think about Batman Forever?
I really like it. I'm a fan of all the Batman movies, honestly, comic book fan. It was a very good take on like the Adam West style movies.
Yeah.
I loved that. And in hindsight, when you look back at the cast, like, wow, great people playing great parts. I personally, my Batman's still Michael Keaton. He's my favorite, but it's a great movie. Val Kilmer killed it. He's a great actor, and he could play many different parts. I loved it. Took him back to kind of like The Saint, doing some of that superhero spy type stuff, which is cool. And like you said, he was believable as an ass kicker there. Shades of his Willow days and wielding a sword and stuff. So it was a great movie. I enjoyed it completely.
Is it one of your favorite Val Kilmer movies?
I would say when I think of Val Kilmer, a couple movies stand out to me. Um, but the one I would go to would probably be the first one where I really was like, oh, wow, who's that? And it would be Top Gun,
Yeah.
because who's
Yeah.
cooler than the Iceman? You know, he stole that movie.
Yeah.
And I just remember watching it as a kid and going, I want to be that dude flying those planes, playing volleyball on the beach, getting all those women. I want to be Iceman.
Yeah.
Uh, so for me, it was just I wanted to live that part, and for me, it's Top Gun. I do love his comedy stuff. The Top Secrets,
Yeah.
Real Genius was great as well. But the one where he really stood out to me for the first time was Top Gun, and I gotta go with that one because I like remembering him there. And then honestly, it was the last thing I saw him in too, in the new Top Gun.
With Maverick,
So
yeah.
to have him, bring the character back one last time,
Yeah.
it was a pretty iconic moment for him.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, the Maverick scene, in the latest, the Top Gun sequel, Top Gun 2 Maverick, so emotional. I got so emotional watching that. I didn't really
Right.
expect it. But I had just recently, like before I watched that, I'd watched the documentary Val about
Yeah.
him. And then I went and saw that in theaters, and it really struck a heartstring with me, like just to see him there and kind of being accommodated in the state of his health at the time.
Right.
He had they had mastered his voice, but through early recordings and things like that, and were able to make him speak when at that stage in his life he was really struggling with it because of the surgery that he'd had for throat cancer. And it was just that the fact that they were able to bring this character back and sort of give him this sort of send off
Right.
was really emotional for
Yeah.
me.
It was. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And like you'd said before, that's another instance where he was meant to play a sidekick character and kind of stole the show.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So kind of like Tombstone. I mean, both of those films, he was not I wouldn't be a cameo, but he was an extra character, not the focal point of the main story, but his charisma on screen, he stole the show. And in
Right.
fact, I couldn't imagine in his heyday when he was primed and healthy, if you had to do a movie with him, you're just probably thinking, oh, great, I'm working with Val. He's going to totally steal this thing from me.
Right.
Like I landed the lead part, could you imagine being an actor going, I got the lead. Oh, I'm going to celebrate. I'm so
Val,
happy.
yeah.
Yeah. Who's my complimentary, actors? And they go, well, Val Kilmer. And you go, ah, crap. Now I have to be really good. That'd be like playing opposite. Imagine playing opposite Anthony
Right.
Hopkins, Imagine you got the lead in the
yeah.
show and Anthony
Yeah.
Hopkins is the sidekick and you're like, oh, really? I got to go against him? That's,
Yeah.
no one's going to watch me. I might as well just take a nap through this thing.
Yeah, there are definitely actors that no matter how low they turn the dial, they're going to be fantastic. If they're going to try
Right.
to turn it down to make you look better, it's not going to work all the time because, they just light up the screen. No
Yep.
matter, it was just that. He just brought that energy and you couldn't deny it. Genius.
Not to take away from it being a Val Kilmer conversation, but we talked briefly about Gene Hackman, who we also lost. And he was another one that if Gene Hackman was in any role in the film, he was going to steal the scene every time as well. He also had that kind of star power that was like, even if it's not his film, he made every scene better, even as a cameo or a walk-on or a sidekick.
I saw recently, we should go back to Val Kilmer, but I go down these rabbit holes when these things we lose an actor of that caliber, and I feel like I have to go back and rewatch their whole library. So Gene Hackman died, and I went back and started watching a bunch of old Gene Hackman movies, and I read that, did you ever hear that he thought Hoosiers was going to be a total bomb?
No.
No.
He didn't expect it to be good at all. He had kind of taken it at a point when he needed money and didn't think that the writing was all that great. And there's a montage scene where the Hoosiers with the team starts winning, and it's it's showing a lot of the on the court action. There's music playing, and there's a snippet where it's Gene Hackman, and he's gesturing and talking to Dennis Hopper next to him. And I guess Dennis Hopper later was asked about it. And he said that in that scene, Hackman is telling him, I hope you got your resume polished up because this is going to be a stinker. This one might just ruin both of us, and we might never work again. So
that's great.
Which I love,
That's great.
Even when he thinks he's being terrible on screen, he puts out something like that.
Yeah.
What a legend. What a legend. But I got to talk a little bit about, Joey brought it up, but I like some of the comedic, the really like slapsticky Kilmer stuff too. Real Genius was a movie that I watched probably on repeat for, a lot of my adolescence. It was just
absolutely.
It was a movie. It was fun. It was one of those movies where it was like they'd centered as heroes the nerds, and it was just like that was probably why it resonated with me because I was a nerd. And I'm thinking, oh, look how cool nerds can be and stuff. Like these guys in college, really smart guys, like making these lasers and inventions and all this stuff and how cool they were. But Val Kilmer, he was still a nerd in that movie. He was a cool nerd, but he wasn't
Right.
Bruce Wayne yet in that movie.
Right.
He wasn't Batman yet.
Nope.
No, but he was just genius for where he was at with his career so far.
Yeah.
It was foreshadowing.
Yeah.
He was becoming his Bruce Wayne, Doc Holliday self. Iceman. It was
right.
totally...
He was in college on officer training, just learning all of that.
Oh yeah.
I love that.
And
I love the idea too of like taking an actor's like entire library and trying to imagine that they're playing the same person in every movie. So when you talked about Kilmer as the best Wayne and Bruce Wayne and Batman, I started thinking, is it possible he's the Batman in every movie he's in? Is he the Bruce Wayne at different stages in his life? Could he have been Bruce Wayne at college in Real Genius?
Right.
Yeah, he really could have. Maybe that was before he lost his parents, when he still had good things going for him.
Right.
Before everything went wrong for him.
That's right. I like to think, that like now that we've lost Val and he's up in, movie star heaven, that his characters are all meeting each other for the first time, maybe. You've got Doc Holliday saying, "I'm your Huckleberry." You've got, Batman Forever. I'm Batman. I'm Jim Morrison. They're all just kind of
which is another great film.
We didn't talk about The Doors.
We haven't talked about The Doors.
Or Heat, and then you got
Heat. Yep.
What's Ghost in the Darkness. There's some great ones. I mean, he cranked them out there for a while too, hit after hit after hit.
Yep. You mentioned Willow.
Yeah,
Willow is my wife's favorite Val Kilmer movie. Willow.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I bet you. I didn't think to ask my wife, but I bet you Willow would have been her top favorite for that as well.
Did you watch the Willow TV series that they put out?
I started watching it, and like I said, with certain things I'm not ready to say goodbye to, I never finished it yet. So it was good though.
I liked it. I was disappointed that it only lasted one season, and I thought it would have been great if they'd done something with Kilmer in it, if they'd done something with Mad Mardigan. And they did do something with Mad Mardigan. If you haven't seen it, I'm probably going to spoil it right now, but they had a Mad Mardigan gag in it. You know what I'm talking about, Joey? Did you get that far?
No.
Okay, maybe I won't spoil it. But there's a whole like lead up where it seems like they're going to find Mad Mardigan. Like they have to go like through this like whatever realm. They had to get something, and they went into some other dimension.
Weren't they looking for the piece of armor that he wore? Or something?
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And so it kept leading you to think that maybe like we were going to see Mad Mardigan again.
Exactly.
They get into this place where they're supposed to be able to find Mad Mardigan's armor because there's something magical about it, and they need it to complete the mission and save the realm and all that kind of stuff. But when they meet the character that's being referred to as Mad Mardigan. He's in a cage, much like Val Kilmer was in Willow when Willow first encountered him. He was imprisoned in that cage. And so you get a character that's in a dangling cage, and he's calling himself Mad Mardigan, and it's the guy's being played by Christian Slater. And so you're watching it and you're thinking, wait a minute, did they recast him? Is he actually supposed to be Mad Mardigan? But turns out to be that he's like a friend of Mad Mardigan's, and he's taken on his name, his persona or something. Like Mad Mardigan got lost at some point and they don't know what happened to him.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But he's keeping the character alive.
Yeah.
So it's like in Princess Bride, like there's always
Dread Pirate Roberts.
There's always a Dread Pirate Roberts.
That's
because
right.
you have to keep the and to tie it back in like piratey culture, that's what you do. You want the name to strike fear.
Yeah.
The Blackbeard and whoever, and the stories. You want the stories to get out there to either strike fear or dominance or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the Wild West thing about a Doc Holliday or whatever. If these were real guys,
Right.
they wanted their legend to be larger than life. And it's kind of like pieces of the same mental reasoning, like before the internet, before you could just be famous and have pictures of yourself everywhere. Yeah. They wanted their persona, even if it was highly doctored. They had a narrative that they wanted people to understand them. Like a Dread Pirate Roberts,
Yeah, I didn't make that connection before when I watched the Willow show, but I like that. I like that it's the Dread. I like the Dread Pirates Roberts.
Yeah, you have to keep that going and never let people know that the real man changed places, because it's about the ideal. And to give Chris Nolan credit again on the Batman thing, that was kind of something he touched on, where Batman was an idea. He wanted people to think of a specific kind of person, kind of character or creature that would do this stuff in the name of justice. And the man behind it actually doesn't really matter. It was the idea personified with that character, and that's why he wore the mask. He almost made it sound like when he was going to get older, he could hand that off to someone and there would always be a Batman, because that was just a thing that you need. And comic books play with that. Captain America, hands down the shield. And now we have a new one, and it's just about the moniker and the idea of what that stands for, the symbolism of it. That if a man is ready to, or a woman, or like a person, if a person's ready to take that up and become it, it almost doesn't matter who it is, as long as they're ready for what that's going to ask of them.
Yeah, I was a comic book kid too, but I at some point I dropped out and haven't followed a lot of the storylines. But wasn't there a Batman comic? Was it called Batman Beyond, where it's old Bruce Wayne and he's training a new younger Batman?
Yeah.
They dabble with that in the Flash. They do.
Right.
Flash goes to an alternate dimension and meets old Bruce Wayne, who's very beat up and his body's failed him. And
played by Michael Keaton.
Great movie, by the way.
They brought Michael Keaton back, and that was a great. There is a whole story about what happens when the man's body fails him, but he wants the idea to carry on. And it's that same thing. It's like, this town needs a Batman.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be me anymore. I'll show you how I did it if you've got the guts to do it.
Yeah. No,
and I think that frame of a story comes, that goes back to like Iliad and Odyssey. That as long as humans have been telling stories, there's been that kind of thing in different cultures and different kinds of stories, where that character stands for truth, justice, and the American way, or vengeance and right, justfulness. But you have to pass that on so people can believe in it.
I just got to say before we move on, just because it was brought up, The Flash is a better Batman movie than it is a Flash movie.
Agreed.
Yes.
Batman in that movie is great. I think that's the best that Affleck's played the character. Like that scene early on in the movie of him on the cycle and everything was so exhilarating. Like he was so great in that moment as Batman. And they should have given him more like that to play with. But that's unfortunately all he got. And then Keaton in the end, again, that just makes a case for Keaton being one of the best Batman.
He's a great too.
Yeah,
Michael
that they were
Keaton's
able to
great
bring
too.
him back. That was fantastic.
Luckily, we still have Michael Keaton. We're not done with him yet. I mean, he's still doing well
Right.
and doing other things. But uh, I don't. I mean, knock on wood. I don't. I hope this. I'm not jinxing anybody. But someday
Oh
when he's
man.
not with us, I think we would have this same discussion about how good Michael Keaton was in pretty much everything.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily he's still here, so we're not talking about him
Stop
posthumously.
talking
But
about him dying,
I
Scott.
know, I
Right.
know. I'm knocking on every piece of wood in my house. I'm knocking on all the wood. But he's another one that is going to. Yeah, he's still got a dozen great movies left in him, and
Yeah.
then some. But yeah, because he can be comedic and deep, and he's just great.
Yeah. Those are actors that like take a bit of a break. You know, they kind of drop out of the like public view, maybe do some other projects and things for a while, and then they come back in this resurgence, and it's like, where have you been?
He's having a bit of a renaissance. I mean,
Yeah.
he revised Batman and the Flash. He did another Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
The when he did Birdman, I think like things
Oh yeah.
turned around a little bit. But yeah, I mean all the way back to like Gun Ho and
Oh yeah.
what was the Mr. Mom in Multiplicity. I watched that the other day.
Multiplicity.
They're all so good, man. So
You're
And
good.
gonna
that's
get me.
oh my God. Yeah, Multiplicity was like the first time they'd ever had an actor doubled
Yeah.
over that many times
Right.
with CGI or it wasn't even CGI, but whatever trick they were doing.
Yeah.
And what a depth for an actor to be so many different versions of one character.
He nailed that
That
one.
yeah,
Multiplicity
He
that's
did, yeah.
is an underrated movie. He nailed that so many versions of himself. When they were cloning clones, and they were just getting dumber and dumber.
Yeah.
And, that was a classic.
And
Don't.
the dumb one saves the day in the end, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
The underdog.
Right.
You're rooting for him because he's silly and you're like, oh, poor little guy. Yeah.
I have issues with Mr. Bomb, though. I know Jerry read that. I'm like, I have issues with Mr. Bomb. And it's a John Hughes movie, right? John
yeah.
Hughes is a genius, but don't call it Mr. Bomb. Just call it Dad, right?
Right.
I mean, that's insulting, I think, to Frog.
Going back to the Doors, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't listen to a lot of classic rock. I mean, I know that it exists. I've listened to it, but I was a 90s kid as far as, being an adolescent when grunge came out. So I was more interested in what was new, and classic rock was just stuff my dad or uncles would have listened to. But I saw the Doors film, and man, did I get an appreciation for the band because of the way Val portrayed Jim Morrison. And you can go, I see why people idolize this guy, or I see why they thought he was so deep. And then to see the troubled version of the man going through the alcoholism, gaining weight, kind of losing his mind. He really humanized, and Jim Morrison was a human, and those were probably real things that were going on in his life that his band members would probably retell the story, the ones that are still around. But
Yeah.
for a kid, which I was at the time that film came out, what a neat introduction to go, oh, maybe I should check this band out. This isn't just radio dribble. Like they were really, they went on that Late Show. Was it Ed Sullivan? Wait, who did they get banned from? Because he wasn't supposed to say fire.
Right.
And then
Right.
they said, don't say light my fire. Say a different word. And he's like, that's the freaking song.
Right.
I say it every other word in the song. I'm not going to change it. And he had this kind of, you hired me. I'm the rock star. I'm going to do any darn thing that I want to. It made me respect that band, but it was because of his performance. So when I hear Doors music, I think I picture Val Kilmer more than I picture the real Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Well, he embodied that role too. He became Jim for that.
Yeah.
And like you just watch that, and that's the one where he just stole the whole show from everybody, and it was his from the get-go. Amazing film. Loved it. Like I said, he was Jim there.
Yeah.
And as you said, I think of the Doors, I think of Val Kilmer as well. Like it's
Oh yeah.
easy to do.
He pulled it off.
Yeah.
And I just rewatched it. It's one of my watches that I've done since he passed. But you can tell that he pulled it off too, just by the emotional reaction you have to it, because it's such a tragic story. It's such a sad story. I love to watch movies about musicians and about creators and artists, and I love to see them passionate about their work. But when it leads to a downfall like Jim Morrison had, it hurts a little bit,
Absolutely.
You're and you're seeing just the genius of this person on screen, and Kilmer brings it across so well, and then to see the last part of his life take that trajectory is just heartbreaking, visceral, and to see the people around him too so affected by it. Meg Ryan plays his girlfriend, and she's also got a tragic story in that movie, and it's so tied in with his, and to see that kind of effect that a person of that magnitude, Jim Morrison, and being played by Val Kilmer, to see that have that ripple effect on the people around them too is just so hard to watch sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and then to watch that story take place and realize he was a member of the 27 Club, so he lived that entire life, a full, great and terrible experience, and still only died at 27. At 27, you're a kid.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I'm in my 40s. Like, I've almost doubled the age that he died at, and I didn't do half those things. I mean, I don't know anybody who's done half those things. So that's another credit to Val for showing you, oh my God, he really went through the scope of human existence in a very short amount of time. In a really the highs and the lows in a really small amount of time for a young fella, Yeah.
He burned hot and fast, and burned out ultimately because he was just so full of life and so full of energy and living it at such a breakneck speed. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a good one. I also watched another one I recently that I appreciated was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. That was a bit of a later one, and it's got Downey Jr. in it, and it's written by the guy that did Iron Man 3. Did you guys see that one?
I have not.
Yeah.
You should check it out if you haven't seen it. It's pretty fun.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I keep going back to Heat as well, just because when Heat came out, like, that's all anybody could talk about because you had De Niro and Pacino in it. But, like, Val stood out in that film as well.
Yep.
So, I mean, when you're dealing with heavyweights, he can still stand out. Yep. And that's a testament to the actor,
Yeah, for sure. Well, we appreciate and we miss Val Kilmer. And I wanted to end this segment of Scratch Off Cinema. So, Scratch Off Cinema is a segment that we do where we talk about films that we're revisiting. It's sort of based on a scratch off poster, like 100 favorite movies, and you scratch them off as you go, scratch off the ones you've seen. And I'm doing a bit of an exercise like that. And so that's what I'm calling these, where we talk about older movies. The poster I have in particular, when you scratch it off, it's got this like minimalistic drawing or icon or something representing the movie. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I haven't seen that.
No.
So for example, I had another friend on and we talked about the Matrix. And so you scratch off the little square for the Matrix, and the icon on there that represents the entire movie is just a red pill-like cylinder next to a blue one. And so that just evokes the movie in such a way, because it represents the movie. Just that one icon, you see it and you know that it's, that reference there is the Matrix, the blue pill and the red pill, right? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, because those were the main choice. It was the main choice for Neo to either accept the lie once you know it is and stay there because it's safe and comfortable, or do you follow the truth? Right. I mean, that's kind of the underlying. That's a great visual representation for, I guess, the moral of the story.
Yeah.
Was how far would you go to figure out the truth?
Yeah. So what I want to do at the end of these segments then is to have us all sort of think about what minimalistic picture or what icon could represent the movies that we're talking about. So, for example, Batman Forever. How do you distinguish that from the other Batman movies? How do you know that it's Batman Forever, that it's Val Kilmer in the suit. Can you guys think of a way?
Wow. That's a great question.
If you were to draw Kilmer's Batman and try to make it, as minimal as possible, but also still represent that it is Kilmer's Batman and not Keaton's and not Bale's and not West's and not, Affleck's, how would you draw it?
To me, it would be a silhouette of Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne wearing the spectacles, holding one of the Riddler's cards, like he was reading, pondering,
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think that showed how intelligent he was as a Bruce Wayne, as a detective, as someone who was uncovering a criminal mind. I just remember him receiving those riddles at the mansion and at his workplace, and kind of like he glances over it once and he already knows, just the way Adam West would have. He reads it and he's so smart. He would just go, "Oh, it's a clock." The answer is, I have my face has no features except numbers. I forget what the riddle was, but he knew right away, and he knew it before the psychiatrist, and he knew it before the police. So I would pose him as some kind of caricature or silhouette where he was just being really clever, because I think the detective nature of Batman was portrayed really well there on that one.
That's a good answer. Joey, you got
That's
one?
a good call on the detective thing, too.
Yeah. How would you draw Kilmer's Batman?
Oh boy, for me, the iconic thing had to be Two-Face in the Riddler.
Yeah.
So I think it would have to be the silhouette of Batman with them on either side. The Riddler and then Two-Face.
Yeah.
Just because it was such a story of all three of them. And if you go with just a Batman silhouette, you're not going to get it across,
Sure.
But Carrey's Riddler, the way he moved and stuff was so, it took you back to, the Adam West days.
Oh, absolutely.
Like how he's kind of prancing around like the Pied Piper and stuff. It was great. So I think that would be my silhouette there.
I'm going to go much more minimalistic than both of you with my response. And you're gonna think I'm being mean maybe with my response here, but here's how you draw Kilmer's Batman different from the other Batmans. You draw the bat suit with nipples. He was the first Batman to have nipples in the bat suit.
That would do it.
Yep.
Right. The bat nipples.
All right, that whole thing was set up so I could do the Batman nipple joke. I admit it. All right, guys, thanks so much for coming in and talking about Val Kilmer movies. This has been really fun, and I know you guys will be back to talk about more of these movies and other things as we watch them. Scott, do you want to plug something? I know you do.
Oh, yeah. I've got a book that just came out on all the major networks that books can, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. It's entitled A Guitar Called Harry V and the Cover Band Conundrum. And it's about life as a working musician. And even my draw to that Batman movie was the soundtrack. My God, it had the Flaming Lips. It had my favorite U2 song, Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me.
Yeah.
It encapsulated the early 90s soundtrack-wise as much as anything, and music is my passion, so I get drawn to movies for killer soundtracks as much as I do great acting and great storytelling. But my book is kind of a memoir, but it's more about every musician and kind of just what it's like for the guys who aren't Jim Morrison famous, who don't maybe go through those extremes, but go through everyday extremes that everybody goes through. And that's what I've been promoting lately.
Yeah, that's so
That's
cool.
awesome, man.
Thanks.
I still love with a vengeance the idea that I could be the one to change. And every spell I said to reanimate the dead could somehow all now be neatly tucked away. But I don't mind tonight.
Hey, ETAers, thanks for listening. We're still in the early days of this podcast, and we're glad you found us. If you liked this episode, and we hope you did, please check out our other episodes, where we talk about all of the buzzy TV series, movies, and my friend Scott's new book. The podcast is on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and a few other channels. Just search for the Every.Thing.After podcast. You can also keep up with everything we do, which includes some concert photography and reviews, at our Instagram page, Every.Thing.After Photo. Like, follow, subscribe, and comment, or message us to let us know what your ETA is. An ETA can be anything that we are doing to stay creative, stay connected, and follow our passions at whatever stage of life we're in, and sometimes against all odds. For example, my ETA is this podcast, and also trying to be a rock and roll photographer and writer in my, let's just say, midlife. If you can relate, tell me about it. We'd love to have you on the show. Until next time.